We want to take the moment now to open up our next session. This is all based on integrating Indigenous knowledge and social innovation for an abundant future. It's a showcase. So at this time, we'd like to welcome up our next hui, our next group. The co-CEO of Purple Maiʻa Foundation, Kelsey Amos. Pa'i lima for Kelsey. We have the Executive Director of Uluʻaʻe Learning Center, Mikiʻala Lidstone. The founder and Executive Director of MAʻO Organic Farms, Kukui Maunakea-Forth. The board president of the Edith Kanaka Foundation and creative director of Zane Designs, Kūhaʻo Zane, joining us again. And our moderator is the program manager of design and innovation, UH System Office of Indigenous Knowledge and Innovations. Aloha no to Alec Wagner.
Okay. Awesome. Aloha mai kako. Well, I'll just get started. So earlier today, we heard about the incredible work that UH students have been doing to integrate Indigenous knowledge with contemporary digital technologies. On this panel, we're going to talk about the integration of Indigenous knowledge in another kind of technology, the social enterprise. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the idea of the social enterprise, these are mission-driven, nonprofit and for-profit organizations that optimize for social or environmental benefit and also are financially sustainable. Over the last 2 decades, Native Hawaiian innovators, the money, have been at the forefront of the social enterprise movement, receiving broad recognition for their holistic approaches. Perhaps as a corollary, the number of social enterprises created in Hawaii have been rising, and many have become significant employers and resource providers in their communities. Core to many of these social enterprises is the Hawaiian culture and Indigenous knowledge, which is the asset that I think makes them so transformative. To showcase what this integration of Indigenous knowledge and social entrepreneurship looks like, and to demonstrate the potential that these solutions have to create abundance in our communities, we've invited these 4 amazing social entrepreneurs to share their manaʻo, their knowledge and experiences with us. Thank you guys all so much for being here. And just before we get started, my panelists reminded me of an olelo no eau that translates to all knowledge is not taught in the same school. So although this panel holds an incredible amount of generational and experiential wisdom from years of practice, we also recognize that there might be others in the room who come from a different context, and all experiential knowledge is in fact contextual. So in this panel, we hope that you'll consider what's shared as some ways of doing things, but not necessarily the only ways of doing things or the right ways of doing things. So with that, I hope that we can get started. Great, so I thought that we'd kick us off with some introductions, and the way in OIKI that we typically do introductions is based on Auntie Puanani Burgess's Guts on the Table framework. And in that framework, we share the story of our name, the story of our community, and our gifts. But today, I'd love if each of you can share your name, your community, and the story of your organization through some of the photos that you shared with us to contextualize sort of what that story looks like. Mikiʻala, can we start with you?
Sure. Aloha nui kākou. I'm Mikiʻala Lidstone of the Uluʻaʻe Learning Center. We're a nonprofit organization, and we grow rooted and engaged communities through out-of-school and community programs and events in West Oahu. This particular photo represents a typical experience in our program. And on this particular day, these students didn't have school, and we took them to Kapapapuhi, which is near one of the avalau of Pu'uloa, Ka'ihu Pala'ai. And there was a coconut tree that had been affected by coconut rhinoceros beetle. And so it was no longer a living tree, and so we cut it down and we carried it about 200 meters to, or 200 yards, excuse me, to a trailer, and that trailer would take this to a farm, and it would become a pole or a pillar for hale, And it was a really hot day, as typically our days are, and it was very heavy and laborious, as typically our days are. But if you look at this photo, you see none of that. You see youth with makua, with adults, and you see joy. And although we feel many times when we're out on the aina, the heat and the labor intensiveness of our work, the emotion that comes out most is joy, because what we're doing is transformative. And to enter that into the consciousness of children and youth at such a young age, that they have the power to repurpose something, is really quite powerful. And that's what we do at Uluʻaʻe Learning Center.
Mahalo, Mikiʻala. One of the things that I love about that picture, besides all of the awesome work that it embodies, is also the fact that Kamu's in it. And I laugh because it just seems like he's everywhere. Anyways, Kukui, can we move on to you next?
I gotta ground myself, because being in traffic for 2 hours was really jarring. And I think that, I admire our urban Hawaiians for being so resilient in that, and then also seeing it's still our aina and it's still beautiful. So I just want to honor too our Waianae folks with this oli. Kūhaʻo. You guys know it? Kūhaʻo palikeha kalai laiana I ka maluohelea kala. Nu'u kanalu I kai o lehava I ka pume hana o nanakuli or lua lua le Vavaloa kuku leo aloha E ka hea mai oe E o mai oe Not the best chanter, but when we give our words and we hear them and then we experience them. And that's really what our work is about helping our youth to experience aina. I'm just a connector. It really doesn't matter what my name is and my position is, even as deep and storied as our ohana is in our community and how pa'a they were to this idea of bridging. In the end, what matters is that ika is transmitted. And the best way that we found to be able to do that at MAʻO after about 24 years is just simply by being with Aina. And, you know, the transformation of taking that action of Aloha Aina into creating Aina Aloha has been the process that has healed me, is still healing me. It is healing our families as we look and experience what that means to work collectively to grow food for our ohana and our community, and to take this Aina that were previously thought of as unproductive and infertile and not good, into re-energizing, regenerating this beautiful Aina. And so even though it's like maybe the crops you're looking at are not, you know, our native crops, they're not our canoe crops, they are also serving a purpose of bridging us to planting our crops. So one of the milestones of success we were able to experience about just a little while ago, where we were able to continuously harvest ulu. Yes, yes. And to me, that continuous harvest of ulu is similar to what you and your beautiful Mana'o has transformed in putting these three agencies together and figuring out the way forward. It's the same thing, just different scale, very different scale. Yeah, aloha. I would be remiss in saying that, you know, my kupuna are from Puna, they're from Honoka'a, they're from Waipi'o, they're from Kama'ole on Maui, and from Nanakuli Oahu. Yeah.
Awesome. And I just want to highlight, I think, in what you shared, Kukui, just this common thread that is the importance of pilina. And what you're building through MAʻO Farms is a relationship to land. We heard pilina and health. And that's so fundamental to the connecting work that you're doing. And I think that's part of also a humble approach, which is awesome, amazing. I'd love to move on to you, Kelsey, if we can.
Okay. Aloha mai, I'm Kelsey Amos. I'm from Mililani. I live in Pu'unui in Nu'uanu now. And I'm the co-CEO of Purple Maiʻa. We got our start, so I'll launch into that. Purple Maiʻa. I wonder what people know us for now. Actually, I don't know. We got our start focused on coding and computer science education for Native Hawaiian youth, but doing that in a way that's hopefully changing up the narrative about that. So rather than a story of they're going to fall behind, telling a story of what amazing things will they do once they're empowered with these technology skills. And so the photo I showed, or the photo that I picked to show, is from a program called the Purple Prize. Alec might have heard of it, that we did for the first time in 2016. It was kind of a kahea kind of program. It was actually more for adults, because we wanted them to start to build the industry that our youth would one day work in here in Hawaii, rather than them just being prepared with their coding and computer science education, technology education, to leave the Pai'aina and seek gainful employment elsewhere. We wanted them to be able to work here on projects that were aligned with serving their communities, with their own values, with the stories they wanted to tell or the problems they wanted to solve. So we didn't know who would show up. And this one family showed up, and lo and behold, there was a young lady, Elena, who was the presenter for her team, for her whole family. So what you're seeing there is they created a game for kids that's about the water cycle. It was super cute. It was animated. You started as a young baby character and kind of grew as you malama different parts of the watershed to kind of perpetuate this water cycle. So it was kind of I highlight it because I think Purple Maiʻa has been a leap of faith, kind of saying, from this imaginative space, like, if we're going to teach the kids, we're going to teach them these skills, but what will they do? What will be possible? What is the amazing stuff that will happen if we do that, rather than from a space of, progress, and we're gonna, so that's what we're about. And we're still on that journey. I still don't know what will happen. So maybe we'll find out at this conference today. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's amazing examples of where that trajectory can go. And I love this picture too because in my time with Purple Maiʻa Foundation, having the chance to meet Elena and then see her grow, I mean, I think that it really resembled one thing that was beautiful about the work that you do, which is keeping students along for their entire lives, or as long as you've known them, and continuing to provide opportunities for them. And it's this continuum of care that's really beautiful. And Kūhaʻo, last but not least.
Hello, Mai. I think, well, one, just with Auntie Pua Burgess's work that she's graced all of us with, and I'm just giving her that moment. And I didn't learn from her directly, but actually through my beautiful other half, Shay. She shared a lot of her practices with me, and so. The funny thing about the story behind your name is I've always had a story behind my name because that's what my parents gave me. But growing up in the 80s, I had my classmates that was Joe, John, Jason, and everything. And I was like, how come I don't have an English name? Anyway, if my name was in English, it would be Rain from Clear Sky. So. But that said, this picture that's up there, I kind of shared a lot about our ohana as well as our practice already, but this picture was actually on October 30th, which is our Lakuahu ceremony, and it's a ceremony that we have every year continuously, so Halloween's really challenging for me, but with this ceremony, it's a rededication of our altar within our halau, and this is one. It took me a lot of vulnerability to send this picture to Alec of me and Amalo, not in my best shape, but I wanted to just, I just wanted to go into detail about this picture because if I was to speak to our community community is a community of practice, and it's been bestowed upon us from my grandma as well as my great-grandma. And so just in this picture, just kind of taking the little pieces out of this, but for starts, at the bottom of on our table of our kuahu is a papaku'iai that was passed down generationally, the ili'ili that come from Hilo'one, and then also within that, think about the natural dyes that we had to teach each class. This few students that you have here is our papa'ali'i, and so they've been dancing for 5 years. Remember I said it starts off with 100, and then now I have 4 in our papa'ali'i that's going to make it into the next Merry Monarch. So the natural dyes, the ohe-kapala that they had to put onto their natural dyes, each of those kinolo that are adorned onto our kuahu, all coming from different parts of our Vaukele, no matter if it's all the way in Vaukua, all the way down to literally right next to the ocean. And so I think it's an understanding of our environment through our cultural practices that we teach within the halau. And then the coolest one for me is actually the iʻe that you see at the top. The iʻe is one of the highest ranking plants in the Kumulipo too. And so the idea that it's highest ranking, it also serves a role as an indicator of a healthy forest. And we had to go out into the forest, into Kulani. Kulani's scary. I don't know if anybody went to Kulani Forest before. You see the forest here, and this looks like the forest floor, but the forest floor is actually here. And when you're walking, you can't even see the forest floor of what you perceived it was. Anyway, it's the kind of place that you got to walk in with a string. But the iʻe grows super healthy and abundant over there. And we actually took my cousin's son, and I think he's 10 years old, and it's the first time that we took him. And only the guys go on this kind of huaka'i. But this time, it was actually late in the blooming cycle, and so a lot of the fruits, a lot of the hua were already kind of browned already. So it took us maybe about 4 or 5 hours of trekking throughout Kulani to just find one. And then for us, as kind of like the makua in the huaka'i, we're like, okay, boys, we got to get ready for come back tomorrow because we don't have all of them that we need. And so as we're preparing, it's already kind of getting dark. And as we're driving off, my cousin's son, he basically like stops the car and he says, right there, and he sparked it out from like at least 150 yards away. We made the trek through the uluhe all the way up to the ohia that had this ia on it, and it had the rest of 3 of them on there, and so we actually got to gather everything in that day. But to me, it's all of those small things that this looks like a great picture, and I just wanted to give you some of the detail of the communities of practice that it took to be able to put a picture like this together.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, no, I was curious where you were going to go with that picture. And you look great in it. But I think, yeah, I mean, one thing yet is the role of entire communities in the development of our work and the carrying out of it, and also its sustainability. And the notion that lineage sort of defines kuleana and it defines work. And so I think that's, thank you for sharing. So you guys are all entrepreneurs. You're problem solvers. And so I'm curious if you can sort of, and this was shared a little bit in your guys' introductions, but I'm curious if you can underscore what are the challenges in your community that you're trying to address, and how are you addressing them? And if I can add to that, what are sort of the ways that Indigenous knowledge plays a role in that addressing of those challenges? Anyone can start.
I just think the first question is not a difficult one. I think all of us know in this room the sorts of things that are very challenging to communities, and I think now with this hub and this ability to speak, with everyone, and through the sort of the gains that we've had through technology and being able to kind of awamo kuleana, with one another, and be able to engage with one another in conversation about these challenges has been extremely helpful, so that we don't feel like we're in a silo, and that when we're doing the work of food sovereignty or education or health equity, we're really doing that in concert in this movement. I think previously, we felt the problem statement was very different 24 years ago, because so many of our opio are being pushed into and guided through the right pathways, and with the mentorship of their kupuna and their communities. So we're looking at a very different challenge. I think the same as maybe solutions and connections have scaled, so have those challenges. And so it's like a slightly different way that we need to kind of be tactical in deploying our pule to make sure every single person in our honua and beyond, even to ask for healing for our kupuna, and saying to ourselves that to offer forgiveness and grace to ourselves, that we couldn't help that, but we still carry the air of those kupuna, and that we will not pass that on to the next generation. So I tend to stay away from the pilikia, because it's there. I tend to look at those abundant solutions, and I try to teach that and mentor that in our small community, because I think it's much more powerful than talking about the deficits.
Yeah, I'm all for that, and maybe, that compels me to sort of reframe the question a little bit, and maybe the reframe is where are the opportunities, and how are we leaning into those? Sorry, I just thought I'd jump in there.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll share. So the challenge, I operate in Kapolei and Ewa, and our challenge is unbalanced growth. Growth is good, but when it's unbalanced, right, then there's some irresponsibility in some ways. And so we have a growing community, the fastest growing community in the state of Hawaii, growing with housing development, commercial development. But what's not growing is programs and spaces for children, particularly when school is out, particularly when parents are at work or still on the road in traffic. And also, in Kapolei, no one really lived in Kapolei prior to 1990. So you have this new residential community coming in, and parents, they didn't grow up there, so generational knowledge is not being passed down to these children. So how do they learn about what's important about this community, the history, the significance. There's no spaces for them to go. And as I was a teacher at Kapolei High School, I saw this. I saw that there was no place for these children to go. And, who am I? I mean, what am I going to do about it? Am I just going to sit here in my classroom at Kapolei High School and keep going on, or am I going to do something about it? So I started to go to schools after school voluntarily and teach about the history of the area to really ground youth in the place that they are. And so they feel connected and a kinship to place. When you feel like you belong to a special place, you're going to want to be a part of that. You're going to see purpose in yourself and in your qualities, in your abilities and your skills and your gifts. And to pour gifts. And that is what was needed, and that's the opportunity within our community.
Yeah.
I wish there was that in Mililani in the 90s for me. But I think for us the challenge / opportunity has been, I think Auntie Manu put it this way to me once, but this idea of alignment, or making it possible to be a Hawaiian or Pacific Islander and a technologist at the same time, and that to be normal and aligned and not seen as at odds or conflicting or tense or whatever. So I think that's both of those things, and that's also the reason for why Indigenous knowledge has to kind of enter into the picture, because it's not sufficient to just teach contemporary technologies. You have to kind of link that to what is an innovator? Like how were your kupuna innovators? How have humans in this paʻaina for a long time, had to be really smart and innovative and creative and work together to be able to survive for hundreds of years, so hundreds and thousands. So I'll leave it there. I think the knowledge, the Indigenous knowledge, has to be a part of that, or else there's a whole context that you're missing. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I think if you took it back to the Renaissance all the way to now, the problem has actually evolved over the years, and that's a good thing. That means that we're evolving to a certain degree. And so I always think of like what my grandma was helping with the rest of the Manaleo at that time was to develop or codify the language in a way that it can be shared on a wider platform. And I think that kind of same strategy is still something that we can work on today. And maybe now, I was talking about how Antipoi developed the Papaku Makavalu methodology. That only came out in 2009. That's like brand new to be able to view your olis as data. And so I think now that newer depth, we can still use that same strategy of codifying it so that it can work on a larger platform. And nowadays, especially with Purple Maiʻa too, there's so many more distributions of information available rather than just aina or rather than just hula or oli. And so how can we use that same depth and distribute it to these new avenues of information?
I agree. Mo'olelo is the frontier. That is the way that we'll move faster than them. Yeah, because we have to reflect what it is that we are going to be, that we're becoming, and more as people become, the capacity grows around these tools and the utilization of them, while we still have guides to help us to keep what is sacred, and what can be told is told. It's like. It's a new game. It's a new paradigm that we're looking at.
In as much as AI is a leap change in what Nikota shared, Mo'olelo is a leap change or something that we can make significant bounds.
It brings it roots it to the genealogies.
That's
us.
So Kukui, you and Mikiʻala both brought up scale and growth. So I've got a couple of hard questions. So
they are hard.
And thank you guys for bearing with me. They were so helpful in sort of co-developing some of these questions, but I had some deep curiosities from being in this space and then leaving for a little while and then thinking through those things really, really deeply. And some of these questions have sort of emerged, but I really appreciate you guys sort of working with me on those. But the hard questions, I guess, sort of come from this this place of, obviously there's so much value, and we've seen so much value through all the presentations we've heard today and through each of your work in Indigenous knowledge-based solutions. And some of us might be compelled to scale some of those, scale them wide, go to other communities. Some might be thinking, anyone can use, or anyone should use, Indigenous knowledge-based solutions. And I guess those two things, scale and this notion of anyone using it, are two sort of challenging places. And so I'm wondering, your perspectives, and again, anyone can sort of start us off here, maybe first about that scale question, and then we can go to the use of Indigenous knowledge question. But the scale question, how can we or how should we scale Indigenous knowledge-based solutions, or should we even? And how has that shown up in your work?
Like I don't remember the question.
I've got it right here. I've got it right here.
Yeah, I know. And shucks. But the way that it was worded was because for us, you cannot have you cannot have the papa ku without the papa moe. Right, and so then growth is holistic, right? Scaling it sounds linear and it's like to no ends, and but it's sort of like what you were saying, like we don't know the potential of purple Maiʻa, or we don't know the potential of papa makawalu, because those seeds were just planted. But we were in a convening yesterday where we see and we are receiving some of that growth. And so one, you have to know those places of the waihona, the different places that are repositories of knowledge and where they are. And for an organization like MAʻO, we have a very unique story. Like we were born in a story of personal loss and grief and trauma. And so that's how we found our why. But that doesn't limit anyone from, going down that path. But you really have to learn to listen to that voice that is telling you what you need to do. And so I believe that, when we start to understand where the source is for us, then we pay attention, we start to listen, and then we do the thing that our kupuna told us to do. But we were too distracted by money, by whatever, status, and that we weren't really listening. But it doesn't matter when you get that call, ho'olohe, and go back to that calling. And so MAʻO was born out of that. And I would say that from day one, we wanted to grow. We wanted to have very, very tangible, specific impacts. We didn't know how those things were going to come about, and I think that's the part of building community. So MAʻO is a story about building community connections where there weren't any. And even though we have a mo'olelo of, and a kaikua'ana of Wa'ena o Makaha, if you know Uncle Gigi's farm, or Ka'ala Farms and Uncle Eric, or even Auntie Pua. We were very influenced by that whole community-based economic development movement, and that's where Uncle Gary and I came through that pathway. And then you kind of codify, right? You catch what is trending, and then you call yourself a social enterprise, and they go, oh yeah, but the social enterprise is like this spectrum, right? And so the more diverse the spectrum, that's us. That's the ecosystem that we want, right? We want to be able to have the uluhe and and the lehua, and then growing of our. So that's the scale. It for us is the ecosystem, right? It's the entire landscape, and maybe the entire moku. But certainly where we are, we can start from there, and we become this place that is a hub for others to kind of be engaged and help us on this journey.
This is a tough question. When I first started in the nonprofit arena, I learned how important numbers are, especially to funders. They want a lot of numbers, and they want you to serve a lot of students. And that was not what I set out to do. I set out to take an ungrounded individual and ground them in community, to take an unengaged youth and engage them in their community, to create strong citizens and strong community. And so I struggled with that. For me, going deep is so important, because when you go deep, that's when you get into the intricacies, and that's where mastery happens. And that's what ancestral knowledge is really about, is that mastery and that specialization. And I'll give you a quick example. It just happened, actually. We had a student, and during COVID, we opened up our learning center. We could only take about 12 students because you have to social distance. And his mom was a nurse, so she dropped him off every day. And he did his homework and attended his classes virtually. And he was in elementary school. And he was very frustrated, and he would get very aggressive and pound on the desk and hit his head against the wall because the virtual learning wasn't working for him. So we'd take him outside, and we would fly the lupe, the kite, and we would do different kinds of strategies to kind of get his mind off and to calm him down. But he would really shut down and not want to engage at all. And this year, he entered middle school, and he came to me and he said, "Kumu, I created a kit." I said, "A kit?" And he said, "Yes, a kit for students who are struggling with learning." And in this kit, he had some string for hanahe, string figures, and he had, the hu, the kukui top, like some fidget, things, culturally grounded. Everything we do is culturally grounded. But then he also had these other strategies in there. You take out a paper, and it says, breathe in 3 times. Take 3 deep breaths for each piko, your center. And remember that's giving you life. And then there's another one, go outside, walk in the garden, identify 8 plants. And think about our 8 islands, and come back and color those plants the color of each of our islands, or something, or write their name in the, it had meaning. And then go around the room and, read what's on the walls and try to identify Olelo Hawaii words. And if you don't know them, look them up and know that Kaui Keoli is proud of you today. And he's a middle schooler, And the fact that kind of creativity came from him could have only come from him in a really personalized environment. If we were serving 30 or 50 haumana at a time, we wouldn't have had that personal connection with him to have gone through those strategies. And we didn't know if it was working or not, But whoa, then this year, wow, like that, he was listening, because he would really curl up, and we would try, and we didn't know if it was getting through. And just this year, we learned it did. And, that comes from going deep.
Yeah. And Mikiʻala, remind me, how many students are you now serving this year?
So we serve about 350 students, but we're open when schools are closed, we're open. So we get direct services about 269 days of the year.
Wow.
Yeah.
And where did you start? Was it 30, 20?
Oh yeah, we started, well, it's like Kūhaʻo says you start and they all, right? And then when you start specializing, right, it gets smaller, right? And that's why going deep is so important, because it's, it reveals resilience. But we started with probably 30, I would say, yeah, 30.
And it's taken how long to get from 30 to that 300?
Yeah. Well, we started in 2016 was our first program. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's slow growth, but deep growth, scaling deep. I love that. Thank you for sharing that story.
Nice.
1, 2, 3, show.
I'll go so that you can be last. My understanding of Indigenous knowledge is that it's place-based. So it might just be a tough pill for us to swallow, but that's what that is, right? So it's not meant to scale everywhere. It's almost nonsensical, right? Like the Indigenous knowledge about where we are here in Honolulu is going to be different than the knowledge that's held in Waianae, different than in Kapolei, different than in other islands. So I feel like we just have to maybe admit that already. That's what I feel about that. I mean, that isn't to say that you cannot have an influence broader than in your one place. I think in your one place, there's plenty to be done, as you guys have highlighted. But there are ways to, for others who are interested in other places to learn. You go there, they come here, we form a relationship. We try to share knowledge, and ultimately then it becomes up to this other person in this other geography to do that work in that place and build that ecosystem in that place. Like, we can't just come in and impose that and be like, here you go. Like, that's the easy solution just isn't there. So that's my understanding about how that works. It's been interesting to see that in the education space. Our head of education, Mike, is doing professional development for the last couple of years, and he calls it Pilina development because it's not, I think that captures the element of like, we're going to build a relationship so that we can learn from each other, but ultimately you're going to fly, in your zone, and that's how that needs to be. It'll be interesting to see, as we look towards other types of innovation, what that could look like. And I guess by other types of innovation, I mean like, starting companies, creating products or services that other people in the world want to use. I think we can engage with that, but there's probably a way to do that that's focused a lot more on relationship and depth rather than just like pure numbers going berserk, right?
What I thought has been interesting in the things that are shared today is we've seen like probably 5 different frameworks, and even MAʻO Farms, like as a business model, is a framework. So I think, and let me know if you agree or disagree with this, but the idea of creating these frameworks where they're flexible and other cultures can adapt those frameworks and can infuse them with their own culture and values, but then yet those frameworks are something that are common and maybe scalable.
I think for, okay, so the scaling part, it's somewhat capitalistic in nature, but I'll get to that part. But on the applying ancestral knowledge, case study-wise, the best case study, in my opinion, is Sunday morning after Mary Monarch, when everybody's questioning why did the judges judge this person this way, this person this way. No matter how many iced teas I had the night before, I always try to make it up to my mom's house because she's breaking down why they got scored this way or why they got scored that way. And I think it was Mikiʻala that said the mastery. It's very important to acknowledge these individuals that hold the mastery because they can identify the genealogy of choreography all the way up top, all the way down to maybe this person wasn't actually taught and was just inspired by this person, but they understand that the procession of that intellectual property. And so for me, I actually appreciate watching Mary Monarch as a version of our culture that has actually evolved and pushed forward pretty nicely, especially in the past 10 years, through choreography, especially through Oli. Oli definitely has advanced in the past 10 years at least. And I think that Mary Monarch has been one of those drivers for that portion of our culture to evolve. So that'd be one version of that. As far as leaning towards the scalability of some of that application, we don't have a blockchain, an automatic version to be able to say hey, you used my footstep. I need some of that money back because money wasn't necessarily a part of the exchange. But at the same time, maybe there is a way that we can start to at least acknowledge who are these people that hold, who are the lo'ea that hold this mastery. And then from there, understand where is the threads of practice or the threads of innovation that they have contributed. And then I think that would be the first step is to map that out. And then from there, we can take on the scalability issue.
Super fascinating, guys. So I want to pivot to the next portion of this question, which is also another hard one. No easy questions here. But
what are you going for?
I think it's actually it's related. I think to your answer. So when we're starting to think about the value of Indigenous knowledge-based solutions or Indigenous knowledge in these innovations, there may be this sort of thought that should we all be applying Indigenous knowledge in our solutions? And I think that the answer to that is probably no. But I wonder, like, what does pono use of Indigenous knowledge look like if we're trying to address some of these really pressing and large challenges, climate change, food insecurity? So I'll leave you with that hard one.
Oh, that is a hard one. I probably reverse it back to what I was talking about earlier, that like, hey, if your 2 feet are on this aina, you have a kuleana to be able to malama it. And so that means that you have to sit yourself in the right classroom to learn from the right masters. And so, yes, it should be available to everyone, but there is a proper protocol that you have to go through to receive that knowledge. And so, somebody's joking around. I forget who it was. Somebody's joking around that, all the new billionaires that are moving here, there should be a course, and you can have a cohort of sorts of how do you thrive here on our aina. But I do think that there are routes to gain this type of knowledge, and again, how do you deserve to live here? Maybe it's choosing the right kumu that you can find out there to be able to learn from. And I would say that my dad was a version of that, because I didn't share this in my thing, but he actually moved to the Big Island to Hilo to actually do real estate, and well.
Interesting.
My gungung sold insurance, and then my dad would sell you the house and real estate, and I was like, that's a pocket scam. So he moved to the Hawaii Island to be able to do real estate, especially how large it is. But he ended up going to college, and he got converted, especially by my grandma. And so I think that he's a little case study of how you can actually realign your whole life and your values by understanding what are the ancestral knowledges of that place that you're moving to.
So similar into our story. And I just remember my grandmother, her name was Tutu Catherine Maunakea. And she had everyone in her home because she felt everyone needed to learn about what was important here. And if she didn't do it, then she wouldn't be responsible, and do the right thing. But also she was, pretty, if you knew her, she loved teaching, and so she taught a lot of classes from home. And though we didn't have any specific genealogy or kuleana to like oli practice or hula practice, it was just part of our family, our ohana's everyday life. And part of it was because of our affiliation to church and to Akua in that way. And I think many of our families, we don't feel like we're good enough, as Hawaiians, to stand in a tradition. And so, that's been part of our wakefulness, is to develop it. And so one of the things that, she did was she took on the kuleana of making sure that that homestead developed very strong values, and that as a neighborhood, as a community, we could come around these community activities and events and our schools and our homes and our churches and our businesses and bring people together. So she was very much a community advocate, and so I kind of see myself fulfilling that role. In that way, but it's like we change roles, right? Also as we elder, and so now the kind of the role is creating a space, a larger space for us to be all practitioners of that community advocacy.
Love that.
So when I started Uluwa'e Learning Center, I went to the elders in the community and I asked them first if this is something I could do, because I'm not from Kapolei, I'm not from Eva, I'm not from the West Side, and what I was planning to do was really grounded in ancestral knowledge and practice, and I wanted to be sure that I followed a ka'ina, like Kūhaʻo said, and ask permission first. And so I went to the elders to ask permission, and they gave me guidance, and they didn't just say yes. And I believe when Hi'iaka went on her journey, sometimes she asked permission and the answer was no. Yeah, because you're not makokau yet. Perhaps, I'm not sure. But for me, they gave me guidance. It wasn't just a yes. And so, seeking the masters in the community and knowing that our ancestral knowledge and practices are vast. And there's so many specialities and perspectives and masters, but especially something that's place-based. There's power in place, there's power in people, and asking permission is really important.
Oh yeah, this is an interesting one, and I obviously have a lot of thoughts about it. My own ancestors are Japanese, Scottish, Irish, English, and French. So this is something that I've thought about in terms of, what right do I have to be a part of a certain organization, or to be saying certain things, or to be up on a panel with these folks. But Alec asked me to, so here I am. But I guess that's to say that it's complicated and it's contextual. I mean, I think you guys all offered very good advice and information for those who maybe are not familiar with these kinds of things. I think if we look around, we can see a spectrum of people who are not Hawaiian and who are doing things with Hawaiian knowledge responsibly. On one side of the spectrum, I would put folks that you almost don't even know that they're not Hawaiian, or it might be a surprise to you, or something. They have mastered some kind of practice in a way that kumu have mentored them over many years. They have developed mastery. They're certified in whatever that is different in different cultural practices, what that looks like, but you can achieve that. And I guess, Hawaiian culture is very open and accepting in that way compared to other cultures, perhaps, in that that is possible to do, and people do that, and those are, you can learn something from looking at that. On the other side, the further other way of the spectrum, I would put, I think I'm closer to this side myself, is somebody who has an understanding, but maybe is content to play support roles, or to say, I'm not, this is not something that I know I have respect for this, I'm curious, I'm interested, I'm on a journey of learning, and I will take the notes at this meeting, right? So there's ways that you can start there, and that is valuable, and people will recognize that value, and the learning continues, and relationships build, and you can end up in places you didn't think you had access to. If you're trying to just get sort of permission to do something like tomorrow, people will say no, and that's fine, and you have to get used to that. But there's a long-term way to grow into something, and that has to be real and meaningful for you. And then the other thing I'll say is that it's not just the support roles too, right? Because so this is something that I was in the English department at University of Hawaii Manoa in like 8 years ago. And it was in vogue then, as we talked about things like allyship, to say, allies got to get behind. And then somebody said, well, if this was an actual battle, would I want my allies to just be behind me all the time? No, right? That would be a human shield. So I guess to say and I don't know, I want to credit the person who said that, but I also don't want to call him. So ask me if you want to know who said that. He's an amazing person. But I just thought that was so insightful, and is something that is there's not one right answer. It's not like you can be in one place and be innocent, or position yourself another way and be innocent. It's a constant shifting and evolving, and sometimes you get asked to do things, and you're like, I don't feel ready for that. That's not. Why are they talking to me? Why is this being? But you kind of. That if you're asked, then maybe you do that. And then sometimes maybe you step back and you realize there's some barriers, there's some suspicion, I'm gonna back off. So I guess just to say that there's a complexity to all of that, and maybe we can talk about that more, because if we are gonna solve some of these big challenges that we hope to solve, and if we're gonna trust each other, and times are tough for trust right now, I'll say also, then we have to have spaces, and it might not be that it's always the Hawaiians who have to teach the non-Hawaiians how to act. Anyway, I guess I'm saying, am I volunteering myself for something now? I've talked myself into, I don't know, right? But that that if we have those kinds of conversations need to be had, then let's just have them, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, we've got hard problems to solve, and it's got to be a Kūhaʻo thing. So how do we create spaces for that to emerge? And I mean, one of the things that one of the reasons that I invited you to join the panel was because you are such a good example, I think, of an ally, and you've been really instructive to me in my journey. So I'm also not Native Hawaiian, but I really resonate with what you shared about allies serving support roles, and we all have skills that we can provide. I won't share what yours are for the fear that everybody's going to go and ask you to write grants for them. But you know, for all of us, you know, we have different skills that we can provide and stamina that we can provide to these organizations, and that can be extremely helpful. So, you know, I'm sort of cognizant of time, and I want to move us a little bit closer toward a close, and sort of end us with a little bit of a conversation about the future. So, like when I think about the future, like I see a really, really bright one. When I think of the Purple Maiʻas, the Uluʻaʻes, the MAʻO farms, the Kanaka Ole foundations, and Halaui o Kukui, like all being successful organizations and initiatives, I see a really bright future for Hawaii, a really abundant one. And I want to see us get there. So, you know, I sort of want to provide the floor for you guys to maybe paint a picture of what does that future look like when your organizations are at their fullest potential, and what do we need to, what can we as the audience do to help you get there?
I'll probably just. It's something that Kamu has said previously too, and I definitely believe it as well. But if we were here for 1,500, 1,800 years, that means we have 1,800 years of R&D living sustainably on an island. Where are those metrics held if we lived here for 1,800 years? That's a great question. I don't know. And so I think looking back at the Oli are a good starting point, or at least to spark curiosity of where were those metrics written and held, and how were they identified? If the Iʻiʻi was an indicator of healthy forest, then how can we use that to employ the same amount of abundance today? To re-employ the same amount of abundance today. And so for me, what the future looks like is, and instead of GDP, you're looking at aina-aligned success. And so if it's aina-aligned success, how do we dictate these new metrics? And what are the technologies that will dictate these new metrics? And so the soil analysis is just one of those angles that we're doing. It's called Makali metrics, but it's one of those projects that we're trying to bring in a Kanaka perspective of what aina-aligned success looks like, and setting our own metrics of what abundance should be, all based off of the direction of these ancestral data that's built into the Oli. And so for me, that kind of future doesn't end at just soil. Then that steps into reefs, that steps into streams, that steps into fish ponds, that steps into the forest, it steps everywhere. And so I think that will give us a little bit more grounding, a little bit more standing to be able to properly konohiki our aina.
I love that because it sounds very much like MAʻO's, definition of success and the metrics that will help us to get there. And I was just thinking that, we had a beautiful convening a couple of days ago at the Crater Rim. And, it's such an important place for people to build pilina to, like, wherever there's generative energy and creative energy. It's, the energy of creation. And I think we're so far from that. I think young people are so far from that. And so these places that we create, they can be 1 acre. We started off as a 5-acre farm, and leased at that. But these places can be, are very super important. But it doesn't only have to be the land. It can be people, and people in classrooms, people in boardrooms. The important thing is allowing these principles and these values to manifest in the work that you do. And so my grandma always said, so as long as our attention is there with the right intention of growing something, of growth of food, growth of education, growth of health, growth of our mo'olelo even, we do that. And so what is our agency? And so in this convening, there were two stories that were told, and we were talking about youth that are really challenged to be successful. And then I was listening to these stories, and they're beautiful stories of how these programs are helping young people. And I recognized that some of those organizations actually have genealogy to MAʻO. And so to me, that's scaling, and that's also like what we need to do in order to be like to grow this everywhere. And we don't. I mean, I love that we can figure out like the lineages, but for me, right now in this time, it's about inspiring people. We need to inspire people through these stories, exactly how you said, and then all the protocol comes with it. Like we know that there is a practice in for us to become konohiki of this work. So that's kind of my take on it, and what that future will look like. So we're going to see so much growth in so much places, but all at once.
Yeah. So it's like the master organizations, the ones that have been around for a while, or I mean, maybe not master, but you know what I mean.
Right.
What can they do to help the next generation of social enterprises to succeed, and how do we support ecosystemic growth?
Yeah, because I think we're just trying to serve as a kua'ana in a lot of ways, as an elder that is able to teach. And so like next tomorrow, I'm jumping on a plane, going to Puna, and helping my brother again lift up these models and these examples and inspire one another to do this work, because that's what we need. And so back home today, this is a production day. I don't have to be there because our team is our bench is so deep. They know what to do. They know how to run this organization. Like I want to say that within your organizations, you need to be able to bring these mentoring experiences into the structure of your organizations. And so, we've been able to do that to a certain point as a nonprofit to, decolonize and re-indigenize some of those really challenging spaces in which we work. But that's not the goal. It's the means to an end. The end is this maʻona and abundant future.
Okay, well, so our vision at Uluwa'e Learning Center is a world where communities are rooted, knowledgeable about, and engaged in the places they live. And we really are working towards an entire 9th grade class that enters their freshman year of high school with a high value perception of their community, with all of these stewardship experiences, and wanting to be problem solvers and innovators for the community that they live in, the communities that they live in. That is our vision. That's our goal. We work towards it. The challenge is, I'll be honest, it's funding cycles. Funding cycles are like 1 year, most of them, and you've got to reapply and reapply. And we're about practice. We're always practicing makahana ka'ike, we're always doing, but we have to put that aside many times to work on all of this admin stuff and the fundraising part. And so in a world where everything is flowing, it would be like a stream where it doesn't stop after a year, but it keeps going somehow.
I think for us, you should ask Donovan, who's on the next panel, I think, my co-founder and co-CEO, but about where we're going. I think we remain committed to the education piece for youth and for adults, but I think our vision is some kind of economic autonomy in the future. We call it eaho. So building that through this technology sector that's Indigenous-led and engaged with Indigenous knowledge at the center, and building value in this place, and then having our youth grow up and work in that's That's the dream, and we're going to try to work towards that. And what do we need for that? It feels like we need all the things, but I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you on that. I mean, if that interests you, if that appeals to you, then, and if you have something to contribute to that, then let's have a conversation, because we're trying to figure out how to get ourselves there.
Yeah, you know what? We were asked that question on another panel, slightly differently, but you know, what it prompted us to do is to actually tie into Aloha Aina Aloha Economic Futures and that platform. And so as an organization, like, we didn't adopt everything, right? Although we contributed a lot of things in there, we took the pieces that are important to us, but then we also see what is important to the entire community, and then align, right? And then figure out, like, where can we push? And so I just wanted to share that we're trying to push into this housing realm. And actually, there are a lot of Kanaka organizations in this room that are also doing that. And it's not just for this specific project. It is for Kanaka housing everywhere as a fundamental right. And so, you know, in this position, I don't know, you might love us or hate us, I don't know, because it's going to get really tough. We know it's going to get really tough, especially within our own community. And what we want to do is we want to ask the tough questions about why. Why we cannot house our people.
Yeah.
Why our children cannot have shelter. And our kid goes to Kamaiole, Kamaiole Academy, and they're willing to step up and do everything that they can for their kids, sheltered or unsheltered, right? And the list goes on and on. Our community are doers, you know, but we have to address what's stopping that vai from flowing into our community.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure
Thank you
we
for
all
sharing
have
that,
knowing
Kukui.
that we know what to do. We're gonna need your help.
Yeah. And I think that's the message, you know, let's all, you know, get together and try to figure out a way that we can support each other through challenging times and against challenging, you know, difficult futures. So, I mean, that being said, this panel has been more than I dreamed of it being, and I so appreciate you all being on it and sharing your MAʻO today. Please join me in a round of applause for our panelists.